Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and good news, FPL is almost finally back. I'm here to chat through all of the key hot topics ahead of the Game Week 1 deadline this Friday. Hopefully it's going to be really useful and lock in a few more decisions in your team. If you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. But in the meantime, let's tackle those hot topics. So let's start off with the 6.5 million midfielder bracket, which is a hotly contested price point this year. FPL Cam on Twitter asked the question I think we're all asking at the moment, which is the favourite 6.5 midfielder to go for at the moment. I've put together a little chart with the XGI per 90 for most of the favourite midfielders around this price bracket. I have missed out Pascal Gross. Now, the reason for that, even though he would have just about appeared on this chart near the bottom, is he would have probably had penalties this year, but looks like he might not do any more. So I don't think there's too much interest in him at the moment. However, in the meantime, let's take a look at this chart. And what is really interesting is that a new boy to the Premier League is coming out on top. Now, Moussa Diaby has some fantastic stats that come across from the Bundesliga. Now, obviously, that isn't directly comparable, so it's probably not a very fair comparison. But the fact that he's hitting 0.62 XGI per 90 in the Bundesliga shows that he is a pretty promising player. Even if there's a little bit of a drop off, he is in a good team. He is playing almost as a second striker for Villa at the moment, and they've got some good fixtures to start off the season. So I would have no aversion to going with Moussa Diaby from the start and taking that risk. Now, if you're not willing to trust the Bundesliga stats for Moussa Diaby and want to give him a bit of a watching brief, then looking down the table, we've got a few safer picks as well that are probably going to be more popular come Game Week 1. Mitoma and Mbeumo are both in a lot of teams at the moment. I think Mitoma's in nearly 40% of teams. He's got great underlying data. 0.5 XGI per 90 is really strong, and obviously Mbeumo isn't far behind either, meaning that on average, if they were to be fit for a 38 game season, they'd return about 19 or 20 times over the season. I think out of the two of them at the moment, I might actually slightly favour Bryan Mbeumo. Now, the reason for that is because he's going to now have penalties where in the past he wouldn't have had them before. Ivan Toney obviously is going to be a huge miss for Brentford this season, and I expect them to be impacted negatively overall. However, FPL is a game for individuals rather than the team, and Mbeumo should get increased attacking threat with Toney no longer on the pitch. He won't get the service he might have got, but he will have penalties and he will be used in a much more pivotal role in that final third for Brentford. So I expect him to get on the end of quite a few more chances than he would have previously with Ivan Toney in the squad, even if overall Brentford don't create quite as much. 0.48 is still good anyway, but I expect those numbers to be slightly increased, and Brentford's fixtures to start the season are also really good as well. Mitoma's still a great pick. He's been in my side a few times in different drafts leading up to Game Week 1. Currently, I don't have him, and I think the reason is Brighton will probably be sharing around the goals quite a lot this season. Mitoma did get a good amount of goals and assists last year, but it will be a bit more spread out this year. They've added a lot of depth into their attack, and Mitoma will be a threat. I'm sure he'll get a good amount of goals and assists, but those fixtures after Game Week 3 aren't fantastic. And with Mbeumo in mind, I think I can just hold on to him for quite a few more game weeks without thinking about moving him on for another player, because the fixtures are better for a bit longer for Brentford. And also, any player on penalties is always quite a safe pick in your side, no matter what the fixture is. Moving further down the table, there has been a little bit of a mention for Solly March at times, but I think because that he's lagging behind Mitoma in the underlying data anyway, and he'll come with all the same problems that Mitoma would have, I think out of the two, if I was to pick a Brighton midfielder at 6.5 million, I'd probably go with Mitoma out of those two. Looking at Eberechi Eze, there is a lot of love for him in the community at the moment, and it's clear to see why. He is an absolute baller, and when you actually watch him, he passes the eye test with flying colours, and he is going to be Palace's key man this season, especially with Zaha off to Galatasaray. I think the problem with Eze for me is the underlying data isn't quite strong enough for me to rely on him over a long period of time, and 0.35 isn't terrible, but when you look at other people on this sheet, there are considerably better numbers out there. And even though he is a fantastic footballer, at times I don't think he'll be able to back it up with the goals and assists that you would need to make him a good pick in FPL. He'll tick over, he'll score the odd screamer, and it will feel very good if you've got him in your side when he does so. But I think overall the players mentioned before have a better chance of getting greater numbers over the season. And I also really like both Brentford and Brighton's fixtures to start the season over what Palace have got. So I think for a player to start with right now, if you're looking on the safe side, I'd probably go with Bryan Mbeumo. If you're fancying a bit of a punt, I actually really like Moussa Diaby. I think if I was a little bit more inclined to take a risk, I'd actually go for him. But if you're on the safe side, Mitoma or Mbeumo are both great picks. I think I slightly favour Mbeumo. With that in mind, why don't you let me know which player you're going for in the 6.5 midfielder bracket, if you're going for any of them at all. Leave a comment below letting me know which of the players you like the look of the most. So one reason you might not be looking at 6.5 million midfielder at the moment is this man. Joao Pedro has made his way into quite a few drafts at the moment, and it's easy to see why. He looks like he might be on penalties for Brighton, and obviously Brighton in themselves are a very attacking unit. Joao Pedro is their record signing, so you'd expect him to get good minutes in the Premier League this season. His ownership's just under 10% at the moment, but I expect that to rise a little bit more before the deadline as people clock on to the fact that he is a cheap forward on penalties. Now, his underlying data in the Championship last season, as you can see on the screen, isn't the most amazing, and he did overperform on his XG, getting 11 goals from 8.26 XG. Now, the key reason everyone is so interested in him all of a sudden is because by manoeuvring a 6.5 million midfielder, if you've gone with a 5-man midfield, down to a 4.5 million midfielder, that frees up 2 million, whereas if you've got that third striker at 4.5 million, you only need to use 1 million of that budget to get to Joao Pedro, meaning that you've got an extra 1 million spare to use elsewhere in your squad and make upgrades. For example, in my current draft, I've got Joao Pedro instead of Mitoma or Mbeumo, gone with the 3-4-3, and it's meant that I can upgrade my 4.5 million defender from Colwill to Chilwell, which is a significant upgrade and I think more than worth the 1 million extra. Now, that specific upgrade won't be for everyone, but it is important to note that 1 million does go a long way at the start of the season, and you might not even want to use all of it in your team. You might want to just keep either the whole million or 0.5 million spare, just in case you need to make manoeuvres in game week 2 or game week 3. So Joao Pedro seems like a fairly easy route into that Brighton attack, and even though he might not be playing in that forward role, he should still be in an advanced enough role in that Brighton attack to get a few returns. Joao Pedro is a player that's currently in my draft, so why don't you let me know in the comments below whether or not he's making it into yours at the moment. The potential template breakers as we head into game week 1 could easily be these two Spurs assets. Maddison and Kane are looking electric in pre-season at the moment, and with Kane looking more and more likely to stay by the day, a lot of managers are starting to worry about how we're going to potentially fit either of these two boys into our teams in game week 1, mainly because their fixtures look really good, especially after game week 2 is out of the way. As you can see on the screen, Brentford away in game week 1 isn't a bad fixture. I do expect there to be a high number of goals in that game. And then Man United at home, because it's a home fixture, I'm not so concerned about it. It's not too bad either. However, after that, it really does become good. Bournemouth, Burnley and Sheffield United should supply plenty of opportunities for Spurs to score plenty of goals. And the way that Spurs are playing in their new system at the moment looks like they're going to be creating a lot of chances and a lot of routes to goal, with less of a concern about their defensive responsibilities. And even though it might mean that defenders are off the menu for the time being, it might also mean that players like Kane and Maddison, or possibly even Son, are going to be very, very good value picks this season. Trying to make a draft with Maddison in it probably isn't that difficult to do, and all it would really take is sacrificing one of the Arsenal or Man United assets that most of us have got in our sides. The problem there is which one of Rashford, Bruno, Martinelli, Saka, for example, would you be willing to sacrifice for Maddison, especially when both Arsenal and Man United have some great opening fixtures. For me personally, with Maddison, I'd prefer to give him a watching brief in the first couple of weeks. He might score quite a few points, but with his ownership relatively low, I'm okay with that. And then after game week 3 or 4, I can have a look at getting him in and figuring out which player I'm willing to sacrifice for him. Kane's a little bit different, and I think because he's 12.5 million, it makes it very difficult to build a draft that I currently really like with him in it. I think the problem is because I've got the 8 million forward in Watkins at the moment, I'm really bullish on Watkins. I think he's going to do really well this season, and finding 4.5 million somewhere in my side to upgrade Watkins, who I already think is going to do really well, to a player like Harry Kane, when I'm rarely going to be captaining Kane because of Erling Haaland, means that I'm probably going to be making slightly too many sacrifices elsewhere in my team with that extra 4.5 million that I need to find. So personally, I think it's quite hard to fit Harry Kane in, but I can completely see why everyone is scrambling to try and make a draft with him in it at the moment. I will be continuing to do so over the next few days just to see if there's a way to squeeze in Harry Kane. He is an elite player, and if he stays at Spurs, he'll probably be breaking 25-30 goals yet again. Can we afford not to have Harry Kane in our teams at the start of the season? Let me know in the comments below what you think. So the final question I wanted to tackle today was a really good one from Twitter from FFS Clouseau, which reads, what do you think is the ideal balance between players that are hopefully season keepers and players with good fixtures going into game week 1? And it's a really interesting question, and I think it depends on your attitude to risk and also your attitude to potentially having to play an early wildcard. Now, Brighton are a really good example of a team with great early fixtures that you might want to hop away from after those fixtures run out. So in my team, I've only gone with 2 Brighton players from the off so far because I don't want myself too exposed and needing to make 3 transfers going into game week 4 when their fixtures potentially take a bit of a turn for the worse. That's not to say that I'll necessarily need to manoeuvre all of my Brighton players out the second fixtures turn poor, because they're still going to be really good players throughout the season. But there will be players that crop up in the first few game weeks that are going to be interesting that we haven't even thought of at the moment. And if I'm already booking in transfers when fixtures turn poor, I won't leave myself much manoeuvrability to bring in the players that all of a sudden seem to come out of nowhere and I desperately want into my side. If you're looking at the fixtures in great detail and are able to navigate a path which would not lead you with too many transfers in any one given game week, there's no reason why you can't look at the fixtures as a good indicator of building your game week 1 side. What I would warn against is having too many players with a favourable run of fixtures for a very limited amount of time, and then maybe you've got players from 2 or 3 teams that their fixtures turn negative all of a sudden around the same sort of game week. That could potentially leave you in a bit of a tricky situation where you're going to look at your team one game week and think, I want to get rid of half of my team all of a sudden. So do have a think about those glue guys that you can rely on, that independent of whether their fixtures are good or not, you can still rely on them to get consistent attacking returns or consistent clean sheets. Good examples of players like that are talismanic figures within their team. So Ollie Watkins is a player that I think I could rely on no matter what the fixtures are for him to tick over with a few goals here and there, independent of who he's playing in any given game week. So I'm rarely going to feel like I desperately need to sell him no matter who he's up against. Rashford, Bruno, Saka and Martinelli are all fantastic players as well. And again, because they're playing for a really good side, who, to be fair, happen to have very good fixtures at the start of the season, even if they didn't have great fixtures, I'd still expect them to tick over just because of the team's quality and the individual players' quality as well. So for me, even though their fixtures are really good, that seems to be more of a coincidence than anything else. And the fact that they are fundamentally great picks anyway throughout the season are the main reasons that they're in my squad to start the season. Overall, I'd say if you're happy to potentially be needing a wild card to get out of a poor run of fixtures for the majority of your squad, I'm fairly happy with going really aggressive in game week 1, piling into the good fixtures and going all guns blazing towards game week 3 or 4, and then maybe having to look at a wild card to get out of it when when the fixtures turn sour. However, because I think a lot of the good teams have great runs of fixtures to start the season, there's not really that much need for it this season in particular, and players from Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea and Man City all have great fixtures for the opening 7 or 8 game weeks, and you probably won't need to play a wildcard to get out of it even when their fixtures turn sour, mainly because they are still fundamentally great picks no matter what and no matter who they're playing anyway. You will want to make transfers here and there and perfect your squad throughout, but I don't think there's that much necessity this season to plan around the fixtures too much, because there is great value and the picks that we're able to get to are from great teams, and I expect them to return pretty much any given game week. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this week's Game Week 1 Hot Topics. Hopefully you enjoyed it and gained some additional information helping you plan ahead of Game Week 1. I will be back for one final team selection video before the deadline, so do tune in for that. And if you liked this video, please do remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss any future content. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy the final week before Game Week 1 kicks off, and I'll see you again later this week for the team selection video.